Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive, where we, as always, take a look at what really matters from the week that was. And today, of course, that means match day 31 in the Premier League.
Yeah, a weekend packed full of action, as always. Some really interesting results, some surprising, some maybe not so surprising.
And that's why you're here, of course, to help us dissect and break down all of those talking points. And I think it's fair to say we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do, we do.
We're going to try to bring you the same level of insight, though, that you've all come to expect from the Deep Dive.
Absolutely. I think, we've been through all the reports, the analyses, the post-match discussions, and I think we've got a really good handle on what actually matters and what's just noise.
Perfect. So why don't we just jump right in, and we can start with that Everton-Arsenal match, a 1-1 draw in the end, but I think a lot more to it than just the scoreline.
Yeah, a lot more to it, I think. On the surface, you see a draw and you think, okay, maybe not the most exciting game. But when you consider the context, Arsenal pushing for a top four finish, Everton battling relegation,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
adds a whole different layer of intrigue. And I think for Everton to get a point against a team like Arsenal, it shows a real resilience, born out of necessity almost.
Well, they had to change their approach, right, for this match. I mean, I know that Arsenal have been one of the the top teams all season long, but I think Everton, they knew they had to dig deep here.
Yeah, it was a really interesting tactical battle. You could see that Everton set up to be very compact and difficult to break down. They prioritized defensive solidity over, really going forward and trying to attack Arsenal.
And it worked to a certain extent, at least in the first half. I mean, Calvert-Lewin gets that early goal in the header in the 23rd minute.
Yeah.
I mean, just what a boost that must have been for the home side.
Yeah. Massive boost, and it kind of played into their game plan perfectly, right? They get that early goal, and then they can just sit back and absorb the pressure from Arsenal.
And speaking of Arsenal, they were able to get the equalizer from Saka. That was what a beautiful strike from outside the box right before halftime. But I think even with that, I think there was this sense that Arsenal just weren't firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they did have a lot of possession. You look at the stats, they controlled the game for large parts, but they just couldn't find that killer pass, that moment of individual brilliance in the final third.
Right, and you've got Ødegaard right in the midfield. He's pulling the strings. He's trying to make things happen, but it just felt like maybe they were missing that little bit of a spark up front.
Yeah, and you got to give credit to Everton's defense as well. Keane in particular was immense at the back, making crucial blocks, interceptions, really organizing the defense.
He's got to be man of the match then, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. He was absolutely key for Everton, and you could see the entire team working so hard off the ball, doubling up on Arsenal's attackers and just frustrating them.
So the draw then, is it how damaging is this for Arsenal in the race for that top four?
I think it's a blow. Any dropped points at this stage of the season are crucial, and for Arsenal, a team that's been up there all season, to drop points against a team fighting relegation, it's not ideal.
Yeah, it's a real opportunity missed, isn't it?
It is, and for Everton, on the flip side, it's a massive point. Every point for them is like gold dust at this stage of the season, and to get a point against a team like Arsenal, it's a huge psychological boost for them.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on then to another match that I think a lot of people were expecting goals in this one. It was Brentford taking on Chelsea.
Yeah, on paper that looked like a game that could have been 3, 4, 5 goals.
You never know, though, right?
You never know. And in the end, it was a 0-0 draw, which I think surprised a few people.
Yeah, it did me for sure. So what do you think was it Chelsea just not taking their chances, or was Brentford that good defensively?
I think it was a combination of both, to be honest. Chelsea certainly had the lion's share of possession. They dictated the tempo for large parts of the game, but they just couldn't seem to break down Brentford's defense.
Right, and was that more down to Brentford's organization or Chelsea just lacking a bit of cutting edge in the final third?
I think a bit of both. I think Brentford's goalkeeper, Raya, deserves a lot of credit. He made some really crucial saves.
Yeah, he was fantastic, wasn't he?
He was in inspired form, and then I think from Chelsea's perspective, they were just lacking that clinical finishing that you need to win these types of games.
Yeah, especially against a team like Brentford, who, they're not going to give you a lot of chances, are they? So when you do get those opportunities, you got to you got to be ruthless.
Exactly. And Brentford, they're always dangerous on the counterattack, right? They soak up the pressure and then they look to hit teams on the break.
Yeah, and they had a good chance, didn't they? I saw that Tony had that header that forced a good save from Arrizabalaga.
Yeah, that was a key moment in the game. I think if Tony had scored there, it would have been a completely different story.
Oh, absolutely.
But Arrizabalaga made a great save, and Chelsea were able to escape without conceding.
So a draw in the end. I mean, a missed opportunity for Chelsea, I guess, to really solidify their place in the top four.
Yeah, they would have wanted all 3 points from that game. There's no doubt about that. But, Brentford are a tough team to beat at home. They've got a good record there, so.
It's a good point for them, right?
It is. It's a good point for Brentford. They're still in a decent position in the table, and they'll be happy to have frustrated a team like Chelsea.
Okay, let's talk about the shock result of the weekend.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't think anyone saw this one coming. Fulham beat Liverpool 3-2.
Yeah. That was a huge shock. I think everyone expected Liverpool to go there and win comfortably, but Fulham had other ideas.
Yeah, they were absolutely fantastic, weren't they? And what was it that you watched that game? What was it that Fulham did so well?
I think they just played with so much belief and intensity right from the first whistle. They pressed Liverpool high up the pitch. They didn't give them any time on the ball, and they were clinical in front of goal.
And it started so well for them. I mean, Mitrovic gets that early goal just 12 minutes in.
Yeah.
Capitalizes on a mistake from Liverpool.
Yeah.
And suddenly you've got the underdogs in the lead.
Yeah, and it's that belief, right? You score an early goal against a team like Liverpool, and suddenly you start to think, well, maybe we can actually get something from this game.
And then it gets even better for them just before halftime. Cordoba scores on the counterattack, and they're 2-0 up against Liverpool at Anfield. I mean, you couldn't have scripted it, could you?
Yeah. No, you couldn't. And, Liverpool, they came out in the second half, and they really tried to get back into the game.
Well, they did. Salah scores a nice goal. Jota equalizes. And the 75th minute, at that point, you think, okay, well, Liverpool have weathered the storm. They're going to go on and win it now.
Yeah. Do you think that's the most likely outcome? But Fulham, they just dug deep and they defended resolutely. And then in the 88th minute, they get that winning goal from Mitrovic.
It's incredible. What a moment for him and for Fulham. I mean, we talk about, 6-pointer games. Well, this is going to be worth, 9 points for them at least.
Absolutely. Massive 3 points for Fulham and a real blow for Liverpool, in their pursuit of a top 4 finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how significant do you think this result is in the race for the top 4? I mean, is this a sign that Liverpool are they starting to wobble? Are they feeling the pressure?
I think it's too early to say that they're falling apart or anything like that, but it's definitely a setback. They would have expected to win that game, and to lose it in that manner, it's going to be a real test of their character.
Yeah, they've got to bounce back quickly, haven't they?
They do. They've got a lot of tough games coming up, so they need to put this result behind them and focus on getting back to winning ways.
Okay, well, let's move on then to another match that was full of drama. This one was Crystal Palace against Brighton, and Palace won this one 2-1-1, despite finishing the game with 9 men.
Yeah, this was a crazy game. A lot of talking points, a lot of controversy.
And red card.
Red cards, yeah.
I mean, where do we even begin with this one?
Well, I think the main talking point has to be those red cards for Crystal Palace. To go down to 9 men and still win the game. It's incredible.
Well, that's unheard of, isn't it?
It is. It's a real testament to their resilience and their determination.
So talk us through how did it all unfold?
Well, it started pretty normally. Zaha scored a brilliant solo goal early on for Crystal Palace.
And he's been in good form, hasn't he?
He has. He's such a dangerous player. And then Brighton, they equalized pretty quickly through Trossard. So at that point, it was a pretty even game.
A typical kind of back and forth derby match.
Exactly. And then in the second half, things just kind of went crazy.
Yeah, well, that's when the red cards started coming out, right?
Yeah, 2 players from Crystal Palace were sent off within a short space of time. So suddenly they're down to 9 men. And you think, okay, well, Brighton are going to cruise to victory now.
It's a 2-man advantage. I mean, you got to think at that point the game's over.
You do, but somehow Crystal Palace, they managed to not only hold on, but they actually went on to score a winning goal.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they scored the winner with 9 men. Anderson headed it in from a corner. It's just amazing.
It's incredible, and it just shows, the importance of spirit and determination in football. Even when you're down to 9 men, if you work hard and you believe in yourself, you can still get results.
And then Brighton, they get a red card as well, right?
They do, yeah. Late in the game, they had a player sent off as well. So it was a very, very strange game.
It was chaotic, to say the least.
Yeah.
I know what a match to be at, though.
Yeah, I bet it was a great atmosphere in the stadium.
Well, let's move on then to a game that was a bit more straightforward, at least in terms of the scoreline. West Ham drew with Bournemouth 2-2.
Yeah, this was a really entertaining game. Both teams attacking with real intent.
Lots of goals.
Lots of goals. Yeah, Bowen opened the scoring for West Ham early on with a really well-worked team goal, and then Solanke equalized for Bournemouth with a powerful strike.
Yeah, he can hit them, can he?
He can't. And then Antonio put West Ham back in front, capitalizing on a defensive lapse from Bournemouth.
Yeah, and at that point, it was looking good for West Ham, but then Bournemouth, they never gave up, did they?
No, they didn't. They kept fighting, and Billing got the equalizer for them in the 80th minute.
So a fair result in the end, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Both teams had their chances to win it, but ultimately a draw was probably the right result.
Okay, well, let's move on to another team that's been in really good form recently. Aston Villa. They beat Nottm Forest 2-1.
Yeah, Villa are on a roll at the moment. They're playing with a lot of confidence, and they look very dangerous going forward.
So what's been the key to their recent success?
I think they've got a really good balance in the team. They're solid defensively, and they've got some real quality in attack.
Yeah, Watkins has been scoring goals for fun, hasn't he?
He has. He's a real handful for defenders. And then you've got McGinn in midfield, who's a real box-to-box player. He can score goals. He can create chances. He's a real engine for them.
And he got on the score sheet again in this one, didn't he?
He did. He scored a great goal from outside the box.
It was a screamer.
Well, it was. And then Watkins got the other goal for Villa, so it was a comfortable win for them in the end.
So another 3 points for Villa, and this win really puts them right in the mix for European qualification, doesn't it?
It does. They're definitely contenders now for a European spot. They're only a few points off the top six. So
it's an amazing turnaround, isn't it, for them when you consider where they were, just a few months ago.
It is. It's a testament to the manager and the players. They've really bought into his philosophy, and they're reaping the rewards now.
Okay, well, let's move on then to Tottenham Hotspur. They beat Southampton 3-1.
Yeah, this was a good win for Spurs. They needed to bounce back after a couple of disappointing results, and they did that in style.
And it was a real captain's performance, wasn't it, from Harry Kane?
He was back to his best, scoring one goal and setting up another.
Yeah, the first goal was a classic Kane goal, wasn't it? A well-placed header from Son's cross.
Yeah, he's so good in the air. He's so strong, and he's got that knack of just being in the right place at the right time.
And then Son got on the score sheet as well with a brilliant solo goal.
Yeah, he's so quick and skillful. He's a nightmare for defenders.
Ward-Prowse did pull one back for Southampton with a trademark free kick, but I think by that point the game was already won, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Spurs were in control by that point, and then Kulusevski got their third goal to really seal the victory.
So a comfortable win for Spurs in the end, and this keeps them right in the hunt for a top four finish, doesn't it?
No, it does. It does. They're still in the race, and they'll be looking to keep the pressure on the teams above them.
Okay, well, let's finish up then with the big one, the Manchester derby, Manchester United against Manchester City, and it finished 0-0.
Yeah, a bit of an anticlimax. I think a lot of people were expecting a goal fest, but it was a very cagey affair.
Well, derbies are often like that, aren't they? The stakes are so high that both teams are a little bit afraid to lose.
Yeah, and I think in this case, both managers set their teams up to be very defensively solid. They didn't want to give anything away.
Yeah, it was almost like a chess match, wasn't it? Both teams kind of probing and prodding, looking for a weakness, but neither one really wanting to commit too many players forward.
Yeah, and the defenses were on top. Right. Varane for United and Diaz for City, they were both outstanding.
Yeah, they were immense, weren't they?
They were really, really good, and they kept the attackers quiet.
So no goals, but were there any moments of individual brilliance or anything that really stood out for you?
I think De Bruyne for City, he had a couple of moments where he showed his quality. He's such a creative player. He can unlock defenses with a single pass.
He's a joy to watch, isn't he?
He is. And then for United, Fernandes, he always tries to make things happen. He's a very positive player.
So a draw then, how do you think both teams will feel about that result?
I think City will be slightly disappointed. They would have wanted to win to keep the pressure on Liverpool at the top of the table.
Yeah, every point is precious at this stage.
Exactly. And then for United, I think they'll be relatively happy with a point. A draw against City is never a bad result,
especially at home.
especially at home. Yeah, so I think they'll take the point and move on.
Okay, well, let's take a look then at how all these results have affected the Premier League table. Liverpool's still top with 73 points.
Yeah.
But after that shock defeat to Fulham, does it make you think that maybe they're not as invincible as we thought they were?
I think it just shows that, anyone can beat anyone on their day in the Premier League.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
It is, and Liverpool, they've got to be careful now. They can't afford to drop too many more points if they want to win the title.
Okay, well, Arsenal then, they're in second place with 62 points. Their defense has been really solid this season. But as we saw against Everton, they sometimes struggle to break teams down.
Yeah, they need to be a bit more clinical in front of goal. They create a lot of chances, but they don't always take them.
Right. And those draws, those drop points, they can really come back to haunt you at the end of the season, can't they?
They can, especially in a race as tight as this one.
Okay, well, Nottm Forest, they're still in third place with 57 points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a season they're having. Can they keep this up?
It's going to be tough, but they've got a good squad. They're well organized, and they're playing with a lot of confidence, so you wouldn't rule it out.
And they're in a Champions League spot right now.
They are, which is just incredible, really.
Yeah, it is. Okay, well, Chelsea then, they're in fourth place with 53 points. But after that draw with Brentford, it feels like they've kind of missed an opportunity to pull away from the chasing pack.
Yeah, they would have wanted all 3 points from that game, and then they just weren't clinical enough in front of goal.
Okay, well, let's move on then to the race for the Europa League spots. Newcastle and Man City. They're both on 52 points.
Yeah, Newcastle have been the surprise package of the season, haven't they? They've been absolutely brilliant.
And Man City, they've been a bit inconsistent, haven't they, this season?
Yeah, they've had some strange results, but they're still a dangerous team.
Okay, well, Aston Villa, they're on 51 points after that win against Nottm Forest. They're looking good for a European spot.
Yeah, they are. They're playing really well at the moment.
Okay, well, Fulham, they're up to 48 points after that huge win against Liverpool and Brighton. They're on 47 points. So it's all very tight in that battle for the European places.
It is. It's going to go right down to the wire.
Okay, well, at the other end of the table, it's looking pretty bleak for Ipswich, Leicester, and Southampton.
Yeah, they're all in real trouble.
Southampton in particular, they're bottom of the table with just 10 points.
Yeah, they're in a really difficult position.
Okay, well, that was match day 31 in the Premier League. Another weekend full of drama and excitement. And hopefully this deep dive has given you all the information you need to impress your friends and family with your football knowledge.
We've covered it all, haven't we?
We have. And before we go, just a final thought for you all to consider looking at the table as it stands and considering all the twists and turns we've seen so far this season. What do you think is the single most unpredictable element that could still happen and completely shake up the Premier League?
That's a good question.
I know, right?
I'll let the listeners think about that one.
I think we should. It's something for them to ponder until our next deep dive.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.